A my na tej scenie przechodzimy już do kolejnego panelu, który moderować będzie Paweł Widawski, wiceprezes Zarządu Fundacja Polska Bezgotówkowa i łączyć się też będziemy ze zdalnymi panelistami, a właściwie panelistkami i będziemy też przechodzić na język angielski. Cashless Payment Development in CEE Roundtable. This is the subject we'll dive into now and our panelists will be Eszter, Rubi, Financial Services Department, Ministry of Finance of Hungary. I ono podkiwanek. Maria Staszkiewicz, Chairwoman of the Board Czech Fintech Association. I jednocześnie od razu serdecznie poprosimy o włożenie słuchawek, pozwoli nam to poprawić jakość połączenia. A naszym panelistą, który tutaj wraz z moderatorem zagości na scenie, jest Konrad Ślusarczyk, Senior Policy Lead CEE z Wizy. Zapraszam bardzo serdecznie panów na scenę, a panie łączą się z nami zdalnie.
Witam Państwa. I'm going to switch to English as we have truly international panel discussion, roundtable, or probably more panel discussion today. I'm really happy to be here in person for the first time at the conference since February. I'm really excited, and I'm really delighted to be here to host this panel discussion with some delightful guests, panelists from our CEE region, from Hungary, Czech Republic, and Poland. So let me introduce our panelists. Eszter Rubi from Financial Services Department, Ministry of Finance of Hungary. Good morning, Eszter. Can you hear us?
Good morning. Yes, I hear you clearly.
Oh,
I hope you do also.
The quality is great, so no worries. And good morning, Maria Staszkiewicz is a chairwoman of Fintech, Czech Fintech Association. Good morning.
Good morning, dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry. Maria speaks Polish perfectly as well. And our last but not least speaker is Konrad Ślusarczyk, Senior Policy Lead of CEE Visa Europe.
Dzień dobry, good morning.
Well, so without further ado, let's start our panel discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, the coronavirus pandemic has been a turning point for the payments industry worldwide. And this unexpected crisis situation has created the so-called cashless moment. The term that has been coined by Paweł Bulgarin from Ministry of Finance, the term that has been mentioned many times today and will be mentioned during the next 2 days. And how we define cashless moment? From my perspective, cashless moment is one point in time that dramatically accelerates the change of behavior of customers, of SMEs, driving towards increase of cashless payments in very, very short time, which actually moves our market, our payments market, much higher in maturity. In consequence, the number and volume of transaction increase, and general awareness of cashless in the society is much higher. And our discussion will be divided into 3 parts. We will talk about the market, about market developments and how COVID pandemic impacted market in general. The second part will be dedicated to regulations. And finally, we'll talk about customers and impact of pandemia to customer behavior in general. So the first question goes to Eszter. Eszter, sharp increase of popularity of cashless payments due to coronavirus pandemic seems to be a global phenomenon. But not in every country the shift from cash to cashless is equal, is similar. how this shift looks from the Hungarian perspective. Have you had your cashless moment in Hungary as well?
Yes, I totally agree with you because Hungary is also a kind of trend follower, which means that the number of the cashless payment has increased significantly in the past few months. It has, in my view, it has several reasons, this phenomenon. Firstly, one of the biggest effect was raising the limit of contactless payment. In Hungary, it is widely known as pay pass payments from 5 to 15,000 forints in order to slow down the spread of the coronavirus. This measure of the government was widely communicated, and the Hungarian people understood that it's very important to have contactless payments in this moment. The amendment of this legislation gave banks and card companies just a very short period for preparation, as the new limit entered into force on the 15th of April. And because of the success of it, the government has decided not to withdraw this measure. The second reason can be the governmental project regarding establishing POS spots. This project was launched in 2016. And the aim was to increase the number of the POS spots around the country. And the government gave financial support to establish new POS spots. It has two phases, this project. The phase one was so successful that during the program, the number of domestic POS spots rose by 30%. Seeing this popularity and success of the phase one, the government had decided to continue this whole project and launch phase two even before the phase one has closed. The aim for the phase two is to establish at least 30 or 35,000 POS spots more. Following the hopefully successful implementation of phase two, the option to use bank card for payments will be available for the vast majority of the Hungarian population. And there is a third reason, or at least I hope there is a third one. It is the implementation of the national strategy of financial awareness. As I realized, this topic has already touched by the previous panelists, as I know it is also a great topic and actual topic for the Polish government as well. So for one of the main reasons for the strategy is to promote cashless or electric payments. Although the implementation, the whole strategy, this whole document takes a very long time. We know that it takes for at least years or decades. Thanks to the commitment of the actors, both by the public and both by the private sectors, we can witness the very, very first little changes regarding the mind or the attitude of the Hungarian people towards card payments.
Eszter, thank you very much. As we can see, the engagement of the state is very, very intensive in terms of cashless.
Yes.
And it seems that cashless moment is not only Polish specifics. You also had or still have your own cashless moment in Hungary. But what about Czech Republic? What about Czechia? What's your experience within the last 5 or 6 months of pandemic? Have you experienced cashless moment as well in Prague? Maria?
Yes, I would say that the pandemic was the third cashless moment in the Czech Republic, and I would say it's completed the work of all the lobbyists for cashless society. And definitely it was the most effective lobbyist so far. And the symbol of the changes in the Czech Republic, thanks to COVID, for me especially, is one funny story. In the Ministry of Finance, there is a bistro where you can as well pay by cards, but before COVID, you could only use your cards for transactions over €5. Now the COVID has killed the limit, so I think this is a very nice symbol of the changes in the Czech Republic in terms of cashless society. I said that we had 2 cashless moments before. First of all, some decade ago, the Czech Republic was lagging behind in terms of the numbers of cards. But the business, especially one, I will not name it, one payment processing company, started to very actively promote the issuing of cards in cooperation with banks. And right now, there are more payment cards in the Czech Republic than there are inhabitants, including babies and really old people. It's over 13 million of almost 13 million of cards. And the second moment was, I would say, not really planned as a cashless moment, but it was legislation introduced by the state called electronic record of sales, introduced in 2016. And this electronic records of sales piece of legislation makes all merchants record all the transactions electronically, and because they had to introduce special infrastructure to connect to the public administration infrastructure. At the same time, while they already had to do some infrastructural changes, they added the possibility of card payments to their payments methods. So COVID, yes, it did completed the work of cashless society, but we had these two moments before. One coming from the business side, the one supported by the state, even though it was not really meant as this electronic records of sales was not meant as an instrument to support cashless society. What COVID did, it actually made all the people, and most of Czech inhabitants have a card. It made those who didn't use the card finally take it out of the wallet and use it for payments. We've seen a growth in payment and cashless transactions by 1/4 as compared to last year in the first quarter. Also, the e-commerce, which is pretty well developed in the Czech Republic, helped the cashless payment adoption. And in most of the e-shops, you could see 60 to 80% rise of cashless payments during the during the 11 weeks of the quarantine. So yes, COVID did help change the habits of those who did not use cards before.
Thank you. Our Minister of Finance, Tadeusz Kościński, during his introduction early today, he said that he doesn't use cash at all. He doesn't use even cards because he pays only mobile. Is it possible in Prague, let's say, from the perspective of citizen of Prague, is it possible to live without cash?
Yes, definitely it is.
This is the question, of course, to Maria.
Prague is, of course, special in the fact that it is a capital city. So it is the penetration of mobile payments. It's the strongest across the entire country. But yes, I think I myself am a good example of a person who just goes by her mobile phone. And when Google Pay and Apple Pay were introduced 3 and 2 years respectively, if I'm not mistaken, there was a really huge uptake of mobile payments. And well, when compared to payments by cards, it's still not as high as I would expect myself, but the adoption was really high, and you can really pay by mobile almost everywhere, at least in Prague.
Thank you, Maria. Konrad, the next question goes to you. We all know that COVID-19 is not a past; it's our reality, here and now. And on the one hand, we have a significant increase of non-cash behavior amongst our customers, amongst citizens. But on the other hand, we can notice a drop in transactions in general in the second quarter this year, and still in specific sectors of our economy. And SMEs struggle with health safeguards and other regulatory constraints, which negatively affects the business. And my question to you is, what actions your organization, what actions Visa is taking during the pandemic to support the market, to support the ecosystem, and to support entrepreneurs, SMEs?
Thank you, Paweł. Pleasure to be here, and it's very interesting to observe how also the pandemic changed our behavior in terms of having those kind of conversations, those kind of relations between people in different markets. It's a new normal for us right now to discuss virtually, which is great experience. As we all know, pandemic crisis affected all of the ecosystem, all of our businesses. And for that, Visa is focusing our efforts to ensure reliability and the resilience of our network, and to provide the best-in-class solutions to support the clients and the whole ecosystem. We are working especially towards recovery of small micro entrepreneurs, along with our partners, both from public and private sector, to help them recover from the impact they have been affected by the economic lockdown. Since we already touched upon what Cashless Poland Foundation and the host initiative is doing so greatly for our economy, for the market, it's worth emphasizing those numbers that already have been talked through. So 300,000 terminals deployed just by the foundation fits perfectly well to 1 million overall POS terminals in the market, which is a clear reflection of how those developments in the innovations in the digitalization space can make the economies to thrive. This is the great achievement of the Polish market overall, and this is something we are very proud of as Visa as well, as a co-founder and a big supporter from the very beginning. One element, I think this was also already mentioned, worth emphasizing as well, is a trend that we are observing overall in Europe, also globally, but especially in our country, our region, CEE region, that is the adoption of contactless payments, the innovative payments that the citizens, the customers are just expecting as a normal standard behavior. Our 4 markets here, that is Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary, are among top 6 globally in terms of all rankings for the introduction of those kind of payment methods. This is a great achievement, and I think we can be proud as the markets. Excuse me. Apart from that, what we are observing and what we've been also supporting as Visa was the strive to increase the contactless limit all over Europe, not only in our cluster. We are very proud that in Poland we have been able, with a great help of our business partners and from the government, obviously, to increase it up to 100 Polish zlotys, which definitely allowed the customers to make the same safe, fast, and seamless transactions, but on a larger scale. This is a great achievement. And overall in Europe, what we observed, we've been helping many countries, our business partners locally, but also the governments to introduce the very same amendments. And after 28 European countries increased the contactless limit, it is worth mentioning that now additional 29 million transactions have been observed due to this kind of a change. So I think this is a great success for all of us here. I mean, what we also observing is of course a push to go to online space. We also observing very high increases in that space, but those two works parallel as an indicator of how digital payments are working well.
Thank you very much. And you said something super important for us in reference to contactless limits. So could you repeat how big impact, how huge impact the increase of contactless limit has throughout the Europe? How many?
This is additional 29 million transactions that we observed.
It's something really wonderful. How one decision can change the whole market within such a short time. Thank you very much for this, Konrad. So maybe let's go to the second part of our discussion, which is regulation. We all know that state intervention in the field of payments is nothing new, both at the European and local, national level. But the truth is that only few countries, globally, decided to impose specific obligations on SMEs to accept cashless payments. And I have a question to Eszter. We know that something happened recently in Hungary in this respect, and we know that all shops in Hungary who had already been obliged to issue a receipt with a cash register must offer cashless payments from January 2020, from the beginning of the next year. Could you elaborate a little bit about the motivation of the state, why this new law was imposed, and what kind of impact it might have to the market in Hungary?
Mm-hmm. Before answering your question, I just want to tell some sentences about the online cash register system, because this register system was introduced in 2014, and it was a kind of obligatory system. It means that the Hungarian government made it mandatory to install online cash registers in some sectors. These sectors are accommodation and food services and, of course, retail sector as well. During this process, almost 200,000 online cash registers were installed by approximately 100,000 companies. This new rule or this new legislation you have already mentioned. The motivation behind this was in one hand, to protect the health of the Hungarian families and of the entire population by the fact that there is an online cash register, it will be possible to pay electronically So it means that those who had already have an online cash register will be required to provide any form of electronic payment option to their customers. It means that they have to provide POS spots or any other form of electronic payment like instant payment. Of course, there is another reason behind this, and it is nothing else than to reduce shadow economy and to whiten the economy. And of course, there is kind of taxation matter behind this.
And what was the reaction of the SMEs for this new law, for this new obligation?
First, they thought that it will be a huge task for them to have this to fulfill this new regulation, but then they just get to know that it can be fulfilled not only to by establish or to install new sources or new equipment, new tools like POS spots, but they can fulfill this obligement like many different kind of forms. Like I mentioned, the instant payment, which was launched in March in Hungary. It means that between Hungarian payment accounts, payment will be available in just 5 seconds, and it became quite popular nowadays. So they can have a choice between these kind of forms. And you have mentioned the mobile payments as well earlier. It can be also by mobile payments if they choose this version, this option.
Do you consider as a government introduction of educational or marketing campaign promoting this new obligation? Is it widely known what to do in January in terms of this obligation amongst entrepreneurs, amongst SMEs?
Yes, there will be a campaign for this to promote all the possibilities and to get to know this new legislation. It's essential, I think.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Eszter. Maria, in terms of Czechia, are there any plans to impose similar law stimulating or similar or different law stimulating cashless payments in your country?
Hello?
Maria? So,
Yes. Yes, I got the question. Yes, actually, this one of the two cashless moments that I already mentioned in my previous contribution was exactly the same law as Eszter was describing right now. This is called the electronic records of payments that was introduced in 2016, which obliges most of the merchants and traders to send information to the public administration online about each transaction. And this was a cashless support by accident. It was not meant by the state as an activity to directly support cashless transactions. But since merchants already had to install some infrastructure to get connected to the public administration, at the same time, the infrastructure, the terminals were used as payment terminals as well. So the state did it as well. There are currently no plans to introduce any regulation to specifically support cashless payments. And I don't think the regulation is the main obstacle in supporting cashless society in the Czech Republic. First obstacle lies more in the lower penetration of terminals. That is a little bit under the average, under the EU average, and for that, business businesses in cooperation with the Ministry of Industry and Trade, and some associations establish a initiative. I guess this is something pretty similar to what is functioning in Poland, and this initiative is going to hand over payment terminals to small and medium-sized to self-employed entrepreneurs and small businesses. All those who did not use cashless payments before and whose turnover is below €2,000 monthly, and they can use they can get such a terminal for 1 year free of charge. After that, they will have to pay, and this brings me to the second problem of lower adoption or problem of cashless adoption in Czech Republic. It's still for some merchants the transaction fees are an obstacle. So this is, I think, something that has to be addressed by the businesses themselves to convince even the smallest business people to use cashless payment systems by means that the fees will be lowered again a little bit.
Sure, thank you very much. Konrad, in Poland we have no such a law directly obliging SMEs or merchants to accept payment cards or cashless payments. But we have a market-driven initiative, thanks to which we have achieved, I can say, the success in terms of fast development of the payment infrastructure. Recently, we reached 1 million of POS terminals in our country. And my question is, in such a positive circumstances, do we need any regulatory activity?
Talking about general benefits of digitalization for all market participants, both from public and the private sector, or especially for SMEs, which we are very much focused right now due to obvious reasons, we cannot overlook the benefits that impact them through the digitalization. The improvement of the processes, the growth of the revenues, the access to additional digital financial services is something they definitely benefit from. And as one of the surveys shows, once the adoption of the digital forms of payment for the acceptance are in place for SMEs, they can increase their revenues up to even 17%, which is quite a significant number. And the same applies to the government. We know, and this is what Eszter already addressed, that informal economy is a huge problem for many countries, especially in our region. So adopting digitalization processes in the public administration and also in the private sector can fit very well to reducing that size of the shadow economy. Tax incentives or other tax reductions potentially for SMEs, but also for the consumers might be one of the key elements for this kind of agenda. Of course, just the pure access to digital payments can allow for citizens to pay in a more convenient way without taxes, fees, anything related to public sector. And on the other hand, for the public administration, obviously the benefit would be increased collection of taxes, but also the transparency of the data they see. This is very important for the government and the public administration as such. When we're talking about digitalization, of course, and regulation, of course, regulation might be an advantage, might be encouraging usage of digital services, but on the other hand, can discourage investments or innovations in the market. As we see it, competition and innovations are and will be for sure the key drivers for lowering acceptance costs, for instance, which the most notable example again is Cashless Poland initiative. This is exemplification of how market efforts, rather than stringent regulatory scrutiny, might develop a bigger success than just a pure legislative process. When we're talking about innovations, obviously the regulations need to serve to secure the balance between security of the system and the user experience, the convenience that all the ecosystem participants can experience, and this is the role for the government. What we are also observing, maybe more broadly from the European perspective, more and more governments are trying to introduce some kind of tools, measures to address those needs of a market. In Italy, for instance, there's a whole package, financial package for development of a digital ways of payment through the lottery tickets, tax reductions, and other measures which can be undertaken in order to accelerate and boost the growth of the economy. So this is the way forward that we considered in Visa, and we definitely working with the governments in order to propose this kind of recommendations.
And from your perspective, how much European Union law or institutions should be engaged in promoting cashless payments in Europe from a regulatory point of view? Or it should be left to the national legislation?
I mean, obviously, since we are a member of the European Union, we need to abide to all the legal frameworks. And as we know, they are not small ones. But on the other hand, such, again, examples from local markets like Cashless Poland initiative resonates really well with European policymakers and sometimes drives them away from considering more stringent revisions of the current existing legal framework. So this is also our role in Visa to gather all this information, work with our partners in every single market, but also at the European level to exemplify such use cases and bring arguments for less legislative scrutiny and more market cooperation initiatives.
Thank you very much, Konrad. Now it's our last part of our panel discussion dedicated to customers. Eszter, my question to you is: what are the next steps that, and what are the trends expected in the field of payments that impact customers' behavior from your perspective?
In my point of view, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I hope the line is
Eszter.
perfect. So in my point of view, as I mentioned, the instant payment has already launched in Hungary. So the basic infrastructure of the instant payment has already been established. And I think the future and the next steps will be to develop other kind of services and products based on this basic infrastructure, which will, I think, means that the payments will be more accessible and maybe simpler for the vast majority for the population, and maybe there will be a decrease in the term of the unbanked population. So I see this kind of trend. In one hand, there will be more specific and wider range of products and services, but the other hand, they will be simpler and more accessible and hopefully for the population, for the customers.
Eszter, thank you very much. Maria, you are a chairwoman of Czech Fintech Association, and I have a question that refers to financial innovation, but in the context of our general discussion. We are moving to digital and to cashless very, very fast, and it's not a problem per se, but the question is, how can we move so quickly and not leave anyone behind? I mean, those who are excluded, digitally excluded, financially excluded. How do you think how financial innovation can address the issue of financial and digital exclusion?
Thank you, Paweł, for that question. It's pretty broad, so I'll probably just pick up a couple of examples. And I start with some historical example. When the Payments Account Directive was transposed into the Czech law, this is a directive that makes an obligation on parts of the banks to open a bank account to everyone. Actually, there was no new product introduced on the Czech market because everyone already had a bank account. I'm not counting again babies, children, and older people who do not want to open accounts because they are not used to because they are used to handling cash and not accounts. So when it comes to inclusion and usage of the basic financial services, I don't see much of a problem in the Czech Republic. Where I see bigger problem is the access to finance, especially on parts of younger customers who do not have credit history, or small and medium-sized businesses who do not have regular income or have problems with cash flow. So this is where I see the inclusion, the work on inclusion has to be stronger, and this is where I actually also see a huge business potential, and this is something that you can slowly see, especially on the Czech market in the recent year or so, where a lot of fintech companies are trying to provide new services to small and medium-sized businesses, such as different types of factoring combined with investments into invoices and access to cash other than bank loans. And when it comes to customers, there is one interesting service that has, I think 2 years ago, also entered the Polish market. This is one of our members called Twisto. They offer a service called deferred payment or buy now, pay later method, and they use a special scoring based on AI and data that is not only drawn from official records, but also from social media and other information that is available online. So these new scoring methods for customers who have a different than a normal profile, as the banks are used right now, and the access to finance for SMEs. I think these are the two where the inclusion work in the inclusion has to be done most strongly. Also, maybe I would add another aspect, and that is the low level of financial literacy. I guess the situation is similar in Poland, but Czechs, unfortunately, really low in terms of financial literacy. And again, this is where technology can help customers in this respect by offering different apps that help them finance their personal budgets and transactions.
Thank you very much, Maria. Unfortunately, we have some delay and we are short in time. Therefore, the last question to Konrad is how consumer behavior changed during the pandemic, and what kind of trends you can identify due to this situation?
Right, so I'll try to be quite quick. So overall, what I mentioned previously, it's that Poles but also other CEE regions citizens are already very advanced in terms of the adoption of all innovative technological solutions. So we can only say that the trend we are observing is only deepening that previous one. Of course, pandemic situation created new, I would say, behavioral patterns, which definitely impacted both positively and negatively sectors of the economy. I can say in general that our consumers in Poland are very much used to pay with digital solutions in a most reliable, fast and convenient way. I would say also that nowadays inherent element of typical young, especially Pole behavior is to pay it with his or her mobile phone card or wearable device as quickly, as convenient as possible, and this is the way forward that we observe it. Definitely what we already discussed, that is the increasing contactless limit, was also one of the key drivers in terms of shape of those trends, both in Poland and the European markets. So in terms of a little bit of the data that we are observing, already mentioned 28 countries develop new increased contactless limit frameworks, which translates to, in most of the countries, more than 20% of the growth of contactless transactions. This is definitely one of the trends that we are identifying. The other one is the parallel switching to online channels. E-commerce in 14 countries of Europe grew more than 20% as well, which is quite significant number. And we definitely do not observe any drops in this respect. So overall, just to summing up, conscious of time, we can observe, I would say, more penetration of overall digitalized payments, and this is a good sign for us, both in online space and in face-to-face environment, and most probably it will be a new normal in terms of how we observe the digitalized payment ecosystem.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we have to finish our panel discussion, and it was a great honor for me to be able to moderate this international panel. Thank you very much to all panelists. Thank you very much, Eszter. Thank you very much, Maria and Konrad. And as you can see, Cashless moment took place not only in Poland, but also in other countries of our region, in Czech Republic and in Hungary as well, but maybe in a little bit different way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Köszönjük
goodbye.
szépen. Dziękuję bardzo serdecznie za ten panel, a my, zanim przejdziemy do kolejnego, to pozwolę sobie tylko przypomnieć, że można cały czas za pomocą Twittera być z nami w kontakcie. Nawet ci, którzy są z nami w streamingu online, mogą się poczuć tak, jakby byli z nami tutaj. Używając hashtaga Cashless Kongres mogą zarówno komentować, jak i zadawać pytania, do czego bardzo serdecznie zachęcamy. Zachęcamy też do tego, że już niedługo o 12:20 startuje Paytech Arena. Tam można przysłuchiwać się jeszcze innym, kolejnym tematom, zmieniając dowolnie streamy dzisiejszego wydarzenia. Do tego również serdecznie zachęcam, żeby sobie taką wycieczkę po tych streamach urządzić.